Now that we've got the intro and the tooling stuff out of the way, let's actually get into the fun stuff. Let's actually start talking about prompting and getting some prompts written. So, the first thing that I want to talk about in this section is something that I call the door rule. So, the door rule is basically a way to think about prompting models. I believe that Andrei Karpathy originated this. Andrei is a very, very well respected figure in the AI industry. I believe he was the one that originally came up with this. I personally call it the door rule. I'm not totally sure on where the general idea originated from, but the point of the door rule is that the kind of the core concept that we want to communicate is that when you're talking to an AI model, the door rule really represents what is actually happening. Okay, so let's actually get into it. So basically, imagine that you need somebody to complete a task, but that person is in another room, and the only way that you can communicate with that person is that you can write on a piece of paper and slide that piece of paper under the door, and then the person on the other side that's doing whatever task reads what's on the piece of paper, and they do whatever it says. Okay, so you never see each other, you can't gesture, you can't point things, you can't clarify anything verbally. You can just give written instructions back and forth under the door. Okay. And so this goes not just you to said person, but it also goes said person to you. Right. And so this is representative of you talking to the AI model, right? What you write on that piece of paper is your prompt. Okay. And whatever the AI writes back, that's their response. Okay. And again, they're going to slide that paper under the door without communicating, just in the same way that you are. Okay. So a good kind of illustration of this is if let's actually start writing some prompts and start generating some things. So again, we're just working in the OpenAI playground. I've already kind of explained in detail why I'm going to be working here. But again, if you would prefer to use another playground or one of the chat apps, feel free. Tool doesn't really matter. What matters is what we're doing here. But if I say something like, and you don't necessarily have to follow along with everything I'm doing, by the way, just want to kind of add that before we get going here. Some of you are just going to want to watch. Some of you are going to want to try things. This is just kind of me rambling about the door rule stuff. But if I just say, what do you think about this? Actually, let's just say we'll just say you are a helpful assistant. You are a helpful assistant. Very just kind of vanilla. And then we'll do, what do you think about this as the user message here? And then run. Okay, so what we're basically doing as we, hypothetically speculate about what the door rule situation would be here is that we would have one piece of paper, and the first line would say, you're an assistant, a helpful assistant, and then it would just say, what do you think about this? And so what's happening when you kind of think about the door rule, right, is the AI model, in this case GPT-4o, is getting those instructions, and it's like, okay, I have to give them a response back, and I have pretty much no idea what's going on here, right? The AI can't see what's on our screen. It doesn't know what we're thinking about. It doesn't remember our past conversations. It doesn't understand vague references. It doesn't assume things. It doesn't, access our other data. All that sort of stuff. It just has these two sentences to work with, and it's got to write something on the piece of paper and send it back. So you can see in this case, using the door rule framing, we just got a really basic thing back because the AI, obviously kind of concluded, okay, I don't really know what you're talking about. So it kind of tried to come up with a way to prod us to provide it with some information, right? Another decent example of this in a more practical setting would be like, if we get this trash can, we can get rid of the assistant message. Then we can kind of just go edit our user message. We could just say, please analyze this email, hit run, right? The AI is going to get confused because it doesn't have an email, right? Whereas if we had an email, that was like, hey, person, how are you? I want to go to dinner sometime and catch up, right? And I just say it from McKay, right? Then here, I actually have to do I'm glad this happened actually. Sometimes you have to remember to get rid of your old assistant messages so that you can generate a new one. But if we run this again, right now, if we write on that piece of paper, then the AI has some semblance of an email and they can actually give us a response. Okay. So the door rule is really helpful, especially as you get to more and more complex prompts, because you want to just keep that in mind that the AI only has the information available, the only has the instructions available to it that you give it. So the key takeaway from this is you want to be as specific as possible. You want to be very detailed in your prompts when you need specific types of work done, when you need specific types of formatting and outputs, when you want it to talk with certain tones. You need to be very thorough about the context that you give it. Right? Take code generation for example. If you don't give it access to all of the files that you're working with in your code base to generate some sort of code, right? It's not going to be able to do it, right? It's like if you were asking a developer on your team to go make a code change to a code base they didn't have access to, right? They're not going to know how to do it. So this is a little long-winded, but I've always found that the door rule is just a really, really helpful framing to remind myself of when an AI model doesn't do exactly what I wanted. It's not the model that was the problem. It was those instructions, the prompt that I wrote down on that piece of paper and slid under the door. And when I kind of go and inspect whatever prompt I wrote, sure enough, it's always that, okay, there's a little bit more detail I should have added here. There's a little bit more context I should have added there. Things like that. So if we just kind of want to, this is just something that I've always found to be super helpful, and especially to people that are newer to prompting. I think that this is just sort of an idea that's nice to have in the back of your head, and it just kind of really concretely lays out just sort of how basic the prompting really is, which is you're just giving sort of somebody on your team that is brand new, that's never seen anything, that doesn't remember anything. It's almost like they were brainwashed, and you got to just give them some sort of task that's on this giant piece of paper, and they're going to roll with whatever you give them. You basically get sort of a mental checklist that you sort of almost want to ask yourself every time you prompt an AI model. And this just becomes second nature. You don't quite literally need to ask yourself these questions every single time. This is, this is why at the very top of the course I mentioned the more you practice, the more this is just going to become automatic and the better you're going to get at it, right? Because with the door rule, it's like, okay, before I slide this under the door, with the person on the other side, right, would they have everything they need? Have I included all the relevant material? Are my instructions clear? Are they specific? And, if you're in doubt about that, it's like you want to add more context and less, right? Overdo context. Give specific examples, write clear success criteria, give proper formatting instructions, all that kind of stuff, right? Use structure so it's easier to read, break the sections into different, format, if you're doing something like markdown prompting, which we'll cover, right? It's like, break things down into different headers and separate things, use clear sections. It's just, it's very easy to kind of think through some of these things before you slide that paper under the door. You just got to go through the process.